There are worse things than dying in Night City. And I learned that the day MaxTac strapped me to a table and told me I was being given a second chance. My name is Daniel Kovac. I'm 32 years old, though my body doesn't feel like it belongs to someone that young anymore. Before everything went to hell, I was a corporate security officer for Arasaka. Mid-level, nothing special. I wore a clean suit, carried a clean gun, and did clean work. Or at least that's what I told myself every night when I looked in the mirror. The pay was decent enough to afford a studio apartment in Japantown, and I had convinced myself that working for a megacorp was better than bleeding out in some back alley over a few eddies. I was wrong about a lot of things back then. The smell is what I remember most from the first day. Not fear, not pain, smell. Antiseptic mixed with something metallic and burnt, like someone had been soldering circuit boards inside a hospital. The MaxTac facility was underground, deep beneath the city where the neon couldn't reach. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering just enough to make you think they might go out at any second. The walls were bare concrete, stained with things I didn't want to identify. And the table was cold. So cold that even through my clothes I could feel it leaching the warmth from my spine. Subject is responsive, a voice said somewhere to my right. Clinical. Bored even. Like I was a data point instead of a person. I tried to turn my head, but restraints held me in place. Polymer cuffs, the kind that tighten if you struggle. I'd used them myself 100 times on corporate saboteurs and gang members. The irony wasn't lost on me. Why am I here? My voice came out hoarse. I didn't remember the last time I'd had water. A woman stepped into view. She was tall, chrome glinting at her temples and along her jawline. Her eyes were augmented, cold blue optics that didn't blink like human eyes should. She wore a MaxTac uniform, black and red with the insignia of a silver skull wrapped in circuit patterns. I knew what that meant. MaxTac didn't arrest people. They collected them. You're here because you failed, Kovac, she said. Her voice had an electronic edge to it, like it was being filtered through a modulator. 3 weeks ago, you were part of a security detail guarding an Arasaka research facility in Westbrook. Cyberpsycho breached the perimeter. 17 people died. You survived. I did my job. You froze. She leaned closer, and I could see my own reflection in her optics. I looked small, pathetic. Video logs show you had a clean shot. You hesitated for 4 seconds. In those 4 seconds, the psycho tore through a dozen unarmed researchers. You failed, and Arasaka doesn't tolerate failure. My stomach turned. I remembered that night. The screaming, the blood on the walls. The psycho had been a woman once. Maybe a netrunner, maybe a solo. By the time she'd breached our perimeter, she was more machine than human, her body a patchwork of military-grade chrome and black market augments. Her eyes had been empty, like looking into a dead screen. And yes, I had hesitated, because for just a moment, I'd seen something human flicker behind all that metal and rage. So you're going to kill me, I said. It wasn't a question. The woman smiled. It was the kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. No. We're going to make you useful. That's when the real fear started. She gestured and 2 technicians appeared, both heavily chromed, both wearing surgical masks and gloves. One of them carried a tray of instruments I didn't recognize. Syringes, microdrills, neural interface cables. The other pushed a cart loaded with chrome, limbs, spinal augments, things that looked like they'd been stripped from combat veterans. MaxTac has a program, the woman continued, circling the table like a predator. We call it the Redemption Initiative. People like you, people who failed but showed potential. We don't waste you. We rebuild you. You'll be equipped with military-grade cyberware, trained in advanced combat protocols, and deployed as a MaxTac operative. You'll hunt cyberpsychos. You'll put down the worst Night City has to offer. And in doing so, you'll redeem yourself. And if I refuse, she stopped circling. Look down at me with those dead blue eyes. Then we'll extract your cerebral cortex and sell it to a ripper doc in Pacifica. You'll spend the rest of your existence as someone else's engram, screaming inside a shard that nobody will ever slot. Your choice. It wasn't a choice. Not really. When do we start? I asked. The woman nodded to the technicians. Right now. They moved fast. One of them jabbed a needle into my neck. Something cold flooded my veins, and the room started to blur at the edges. I felt hands on my arms, my legs, my head. I heard the whir of surgical tools, and then I felt the first cut. I'd always heard that cyberware installation was painless if you had a good Ripper doc. That was a lie. Or maybe MaxTac just didn't care about comfort. I felt every incision, every implant sliding into place, every nerve being rerouted and reconnected. My left arm went first. They peeled back the skin and muscle, removed the bone, and installed a synthetic replacement. Carbon fiber wrapped in synthetic flesh, powered by a microreactor embedded in my shoulder. I watched it happen. They didn't sedate me fully. They wanted me to see. Why? I managed to gasp between waves of pain. Because you need to understand, the woman said. She was still there, watching, always watching. You're not human anymore, Kovac. You're a weapon, and weapons don't get to look away. My right arm went next, then my legs, then my spine. They opened me up from the base of my skull to my tailbone and threaded a titanium reinforcement through my vertebrae. I felt every second of it. I screamed until my voice gave out, and then I screamed silently, thrashing against the restraints until the polymer cut into my wrists and drew blood. But the worst part wasn't the pain. It was the knowing. With every piece of chrome they installed, I could feel myself changing. My body was becoming something else. My reflexes sharpened. My vision enhanced. Data streams started appearing at the edges of my perception. Biometric readings, threat assessments, ammunition counts for weapons I wasn't even holding yet. I was being turned into something efficient, something lethal, something that wouldn't hesitate. When they were finally done, they let me sit up. I looked down at my hands. Both chrome now, fingers articulated with inhuman precision. I flexed them, and they responded instantly, faster than flesh ever could. I felt strong. I felt powerful. I felt sick. Stand, the woman ordered. I did. My legs moved smoothly, perfectly balanced. I didn't stumble, didn't sway. The world came into sharp focus. I could see every crack in the concrete walls, hear the hum of the ventilation system 3 rooms away, smell the nervous sweat on one of the technicians. It was overwhelming. Good, the woman said. Now comes the hard part. I didn't understand what she meant. Not then. They took me to another room. Smaller, darker. A single chair sat in the center, surrounded by neural interface equipment. The woman gestured for me to sit, and I did. I don't know why I obeyed. Maybe because some part of me still believed this was redemption. Maybe because I was too scared to do anything else. They lowered a neural interface crown onto my head. Dozens of thin cables that pierced my skull and connected directly to my brain. I felt them slide in, one by one, worming through bone and tissue until they found the right neurons. This is a behavioral conditioning protocol, the woman explained. We're going to teach you how to kill without thinking, how to assess threats in microseconds, how to prioritize targets, how to override your human instincts, fear, mercy, hesitation, all the things that made you fail before. You're going to reprogram me, I said. We're going to make you better. The screen in front of me flickered to life. Images flashed. Faces, bodies, scenarios. A man holding a gun. A woman with chrome arms. A child running. Each image appeared for less than a second, and with each one I felt a jolt through the neural interface. My brain was being conditioned to respond, to categorize, to decide. Threat, non-threat, eliminate, ignore. Over and over and over again. I don't know how long it lasted. Hours, days. Time stopped meaning anything. All that existed was the screen and the jolts and the cold logic being burned into my mind. When they finally pulled me out, I wasn't the same person who'd gone in. I stood up from the chair, and the woman was watching me with those dead eyes. Test time, she said. They led me to a room that looked like a street corner in Night City. Fake neon signs. Fake storefronts, fake crowds of people milling around. Except the people weren't fake. They were prisoners, gang members, corporate traitors, people who'd been deemed expendable. And one of them, a man in the back twitching and jerking with obvious cyberware malfunction, was a cyberpsycho. The woman handed me a gun. Standard issue MaxTac sidearm, smart link to my neural interface. Neutralize the threat, she said. Minimize collateral damage. I looked at the crowd, at the innocent people mixed in with the guilty, at the cyberpsycho in the back, his hands already morphing into blades. 4 weeks ago, I would have hesitated. I would have tried to evacuate the civilians first. I would have looked for a clean shot, but I wasn't that person anymore. My body moved before my mind caught up. I raised the gun, and the smart link highlighted the cyberpsycho in red. Threat assessment appeared in my vision. Augmented strength, bladed arms, compromised neural system. I calculated angles, trajectories, probability of collateral damage. The crowd was too dense. A straight shot would risk hitting 2 civilians behind the target. So I didn't take a straight shot. I moved. My chrome legs launched me forward, faster than any human could react. I closed the distance in 3 seconds, my left arm grabbing a civilian and pulling her out of the line of fire. The cyberpsycho turned toward me, blades raised. I shot him twice, once in the knee to drop him, once in the head to finish it. Clean. Efficient. No hesitation. The entire engagement took 7 seconds. The woman smiled. Welcome to MaxTac, Kovac. The thing about becoming a weapon is that people stop seeing you as human pretty quickly. And the worst part? You stop seeing yourself that way too. They gave me a badge and a call sign. Razor. Not because I was sharp, but because I cut through problems without leaving loose ends. My first week as a MaxTac operative, I put down 4 cyberpsychos. The second week, 6. By the end of the first month, I'd stopped counting. They all blurred together, faces twisted by too much chrome, bodies jerking with malfunctioning implants, eyes empty of everything except rage and pain. I was good at my job. Too good. My partner was a woman named Kira. She'd been MaxTac for 3 years before I joined, and her body was more machine than mine. Both arms chrome, both legs, half her torso replaced with armor plating. Her face was mostly human, but there was a thin line of silver scarring along her jaw where they'd installed a voice modulator. She didn't talk much. When she did, her voice had the same electronic edge as the woman who'd recruited me. Don't get attached to the targets, she told me on our first patrol together. We were cruising through Watson in an unmarked AV, scanning for reports of cyberpsycho activity. They're not people anymore. They're glitches, errors in the system. Our job is to delete them. I nodded. That's what the conditioning had taught me. That's what my brain now believed, whether I wanted it to or not. But sometimes, late at night when I was alone in my assigned quarters, a sterile box in the MaxTac facility, barely bigger than a closet, I'd catch myself staring at my chrome hands and wondering where Daniel Kovac had gone, if he'd ever really existed at all. The calls came in at all hours. MaxTac dispatch didn't care about sleep schedules or meal breaks. When a cyberpsycho started tearing apart a marketplace or gunning down pedestrians, we dropped everything and moved. The AV would scream across the city, sirens blaring, and we'd rappel down into whatever hell was waiting for us. Most of the time, it was straightforward. The psycho would be in full brake, attacking anything that moved, their augmented bodies overclocked and burning out. We'd arrive, assess, neutralize, clean, efficient, no hesitation. But sometimes, not often, but sometimes, I'd see something that made the conditioning crack just a little, like the woman in Kabuki. We got the call around midnight. Cyberpsycho tearing through a ramen shop, 3 dead already. Kira and I dropped in through the roof, our tactical visors scanning for the threat. I found her in the back kitchen, covered in blood, her chrome arm still dripping with it. She was standing over a body, a man in a cheap suit, his face beaten beyond recognition. Target acquired, I said automatically, raising my weapon. But then I heard her crying. It was quiet, barely audible over the hum of refrigeration units and the distant wail of sirens. But she was crying, real tears running down her face, mixing with the blood. "Please," she whispered. Not to us, to the body at her feet. "Please wake up. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. The chrome, it just..." Kira fired. A single shot to the head. The woman dropped. "Target neutralized," Kira said into comms. Then she looked at me. Problem? I should have said no. The conditioning should have made me say no. But for a moment I just stared at the body and thought about the word glitch. "No problem," I finally said. Kira nodded and started gathering evidence. ID tags, cyberware serial numbers, residual data from the woman's neural implants. I watched her work, and I wondered if the woman had been crying for the man she'd killed or for herself. Back at the facility, they debriefed us. Standard procedure. They pulled the tactical footage from our visors and analyzed our response times, our accuracy, our efficiency. The operation was deemed a success. Another glitch deleted. Another threat removed from Night City. Nobody mentioned the crying. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bunk staring at the ceiling and tried to remember what it felt like to be afraid. Really afraid. Not the tactical fear that came with combat, the quick burst of adrenaline that sharpened reflexes and heightened awareness, but existential fear. The fear of losing yourself. The fear of becoming something you can't come back from. I couldn't find it. The conditioning had buried it too deep. My second month as MaxTac, they started giving me solo assignments. High-priority targets. Cyberpsychos who'd gone dark. Hiding in the city's sprawl. Too dangerous to let run loose, but too smart to catch in the open. I hunted them. Tracked them through layers of false IDs and encrypted comms and black market safe houses. And when I found them, I put them down. I was efficient. I was effective. I was becoming the thing I'd been built to be. But I was also starting to notice things. Small things. Patterns. Most of the cyberpsychos I hunted weren't random lunatics. They had histories, families, jobs. One had been a netrunner for Militech before her implants overloaded. Another had been a construction worker who'd installed black market chrome to keep up with impossible quotas. A third had been a combat medic who'd augmented herself to save more lives and ended up losing her mind instead. They all had reasons. They all had breaking points. And most of those breaking points had corporate fingerprints all over them. I didn't report this observation. The conditioning told me it wasn't relevant. A glitch was a glitch regardless of how it started. But somewhere in the back of my mind, in whatever corner of Daniel Kovac still existed, a question started forming. What if I was just hunting symptoms? What if the real disease was still out there, creating more victims every day? I pushed the thought down, focused on the work, became better at killing and worse at thinking. Then came the Westbrook incident. We got the call during a morning briefing. Cyberpsycho had barricaded himself in a penthouse apartment in Westbrook. Corporate district, high security, lots of collateral risk. NCPD had tried to breach and lost 4 officers. MaxTac was being called in to clean it up. Kira and I geared up and headed out. The flight over was quiet. I checked my weapons. Smart-linked pistol, tactical shotgun, monofilament whip coiled at my hip. All chrome, all deadly. I ran diagnostics on my augments. Everything green. I was ready. The penthouse was on the 43rd floor of a Corpo Plaza tower. We breached through the window. Shaped charge blew the glass inward, and we rappelled in through the smoke. My visor switched to thermal imaging. 1 heat signature in the back bedroom. Armed. Augmented. Threat level. Extreme. "Razor, you take point," Kira said. "I'll cover." I moved through the apartment. Expensive furniture. Corporate art on the walls. Everything clean and sterile, except for the blood. There was blood everywhere, smeared on the walls, pooled on the marble floor, handprints dragged across the window. The heat signature was moving erratically, pacing back and forth. I reached the bedroom door. Listened. Heard breathing. Ragged, wet, punctuated by electronic glitches. I kicked the door open and went in fast. The cyberpsycho was a man. Middle-aged. Corporate suit, torn and bloody. His arms were chrome. High-end military models, the kind that cost more than most people made in a year. His eyes were augmented too, glowing red with whatever combat software was running through his head. He'd killed someone. A woman lay on the bed. Her throat slit. Her eyes still open. "Target acquired," I said, raising my weapon. The man looked at me. And for a moment, just a moment, the red glow faded from his eyes. "Please," he said. His voice was his own. Human. "Please, I didn't want to. She was going to leave. She found out about the embezzlement. I couldn't let her." He wasn't a cyberpsycho. Not really. He was a murderer using Chrome as an excuse. My finger tightened on the trigger. He's not psycho, I said into comms. He's just a killer. Doesn't matter, Kira's voice crackled back. Neutralize the threat. The man's eyes flared red again. The combat software taking over. He lunged at me, chrome arms extending, fingers morphing into blades. I shot him. 3 times. Center mass. He dropped. But as I stood over his body, I realized something. The conditioning had told me to kill him. My orders had told me to kill him. But my conscience, that tiny dying piece of Daniel Kovac, had wanted to arrest him, to let him face justice, to let him be human enough to pay for what he'd done. Instead, I just deleted him. Kira entered the room, assessed the scene, nodded. Clean work. I didn't respond. The cracks started showing 3 months in. Little things at first. Moments where the conditioning faltered and something human broke through. I'd be in the middle of a takedown, weapon raised, target in my sights, and I'd hesitate. Not long, maybe half a second, but in MaxTac, half a second was an eternity. It was enough for a psycho to pivot, for a civilian to stumble into the line of fire, for everything to go wrong. Kira noticed. You're slipping, Razor, she said after a botched operation in Pacifica. We'd cornered a cyberpsycho in an abandoned factory, but I'd frozen when I realized he was just a kid. Couldn't have been older than 17. His body already riddled with cheap chrome and black market implants. In that half second of hesitation, he'd broken past our perimeter and killed 2 NCPD officers before Kira put him down. I'm fine, I said. You're not. She grabbed my arm, her chrome fingers strong enough to dent my synthetic plating. You're starting to think again. That's dangerous. I'm just being thorough. You're being human. She released me, her expression unreadable. And humans fail. You know what happens to MaxTac operatives who fail. I did. I'd seen it. They got decommissioned, stripped of their chrome, wiped of their training, and dumped back into Night City with nothing but a head full of trauma and a body that didn't work anymore. If they were lucky. If they weren't, they disappeared into one of MaxTac's sublevels and nobody ever saw them again. I won't fail, I said. But I was lying, and we both knew it. The problem was, the more I killed, the more I started seeing the pattern. Every cyberpsycho had a story. Every story led back to the same source. Corporate exploitation. Workers pushed beyond their limits. Soldiers discarded after their service. Civilians who augmented themselves just to survive in a city that demanded you be more than human to have a chance. And MaxTac was just cleaning up the mess. We weren't solving anything. We were just putting down the victims after the Corps had squeezed everything they could from them. I started researching. Late at night, when I should have been recharging, I'd jack into the facility's database and pull files. Case reports, autopsy records, corporate employment histories. I traced patterns. How many psychos had worked for Arasaka before breaking? How many had Militech implants? How many had been turned into weapons just like me? The numbers were damning. I found files on the Redemption Initiative too. My program. Turns out I wasn't special. There were dozens of us. Corporate failures, NCPD washouts, gang members who'd shown potential. All of us rebuilt. All of us conditioned. All of us turned into hunting dogs for the same system that created the monsters we were killing. I found my own file. Saw the assessment notes. Subject shows strong compliance conditioning. Recommended for long-term deployment. Estimated operational lifespan. 18 months before behavioral degradation. 18 months. They'd calculated how long I'd last before I either burned out or broke down. I was a resource. A tool with an expiration date. I should have been angry. The old Daniel Kovac would have been furious. But the conditioning kept my emotions muted. Distant. All I felt was a cold kind of clarity. I was hunting the wrong targets. The thought came to me during a raid in Haywood. We'd been called in to handle a psycho who'd gone berserk in a corporate office building. 17 dead by the time we arrived. The psycho was a woman, a former administrative assistant who'd installed cheap neural implants to keep up with her workload. The implants had fried her limbic system, and she'd snapped. I cornered her in a server room. She was crouched behind a rack of machines, sobbing, her hands covered in blood. When she saw me, she didn't attack. She just looked at me with these broken, haunted eyes and said, "They promised it would help. They said I'd be better, faster, worth keeping." I knew that feeling. The desperation to be useful, to matter. I raised my gun. "I'm sorry," I said. And I meant it. Not just for her. For all of them. For every glitch I'd deleted without asking why they'd broken in the first place. I pulled the trigger. But this time, as I watched her body fall, I made a decision. A real one. Not conditioned. Not programmed. Mine. I was going to find out who was really responsible for this. And I was going to make them pay. It started small. I began documenting everything. Every psycho I put down, I pulled their employment records, their medical histories, their augmentation receipts. I built a database, encrypted, hidden in a partition of my neural implant where MaxTax monitoring couldn't reach. It was dangerous. If they caught me, I'd be decommissioned. But I didn't care anymore. The pattern became impossible to ignore. 70% of cyberpsychos had been employed by one of the major corps. 90% had received their augmentations through corporate-sponsored programs, and nearly all of them had been flagged internally as high burnout risk before they broke. The corps knew. They knew their workers were breaking. They knew the chrome they were installing was faulty or incompatible or just too much for the human brain to handle. And they didn't care. Because it was cheaper to let MaxTac clean up the mess than to invest in safer augmentations or better mental health support. We weren't protecting the city. We were protecting the bottom line. I needed proof. Real proof. Something I could take public. Something that would force the city to see what was happening. So I started tracking one specific case. A man named Eric Vasquez, former Militech combat engineer. He'd been augmented heavily during his service. Military-grade limbs, neural reflex boosters, pain suppressors. When his contract ended, Militech had dumped him back into civilian life with a severance package and a warning not to discuss his augmentations. Within 6 months, he'd started having episodes. Violent outbursts. Memory loss. Textbook cyberpsychosis. Militech's internal files flagged him as a liability. But instead of helping him, they just monitored him. Waited. And when he finally snapped and killed 4 people in a Corpo Plaza cafe, MaxTac was called in. I wasn't on that operation, but I found the reports, found the evidence logs, found the internal memos from Militech discussing Vasquez's deterioration like he was a product recall instead of a human being. This was my proof. This was what I needed. I just had to figure out what to do with it. The decision came during a routine patrol. Kira and I were cruising through city center when dispatch called in a possible psycho sighting in an underground market. We descended into the lower levels. Neon-lit tunnels packed with vendors selling everything from bootleg BDs to military-grade chrome. The crowd scattered when they saw us coming. We found the target in a makeshift clinic. A Ripper Doc shop, barely bigger than a closet. Equipment cobbled together from salvaged parts. The psycho was on the operating table. A young man, maybe 25, his chest cracked open, wires and tubes running into his body. The Ripper Doc was working frantically, trying to remove a malfunctioning heart implant. "MaxTac!" Kira shouted. "Step away from the target!" The Ripper Doc didn't move. He kept working, his hands steady. "He's not a threat," the doc said. His voice was calm, tired. "His implant is failing. If I don't remove it, he'll die." "Step away," Kira repeated. She had her weapon up. "Now." The Ripper Doc looked at her, looked at me, then back at his patient. "No." I saw Kira's finger tighten on the trigger. I moved without thinking, stepped between her and the doc. "Stand down." Kira stared at me. "What?" "He's right. The target isn't psycho. He's just sick. We're not killing a sick man." "Our orders." "Fuck the orders." The words came out before I could stop them. And once they were out, I couldn't take them back. "This isn't right. You know it's not right." For a long moment, Kira just looked at me. I couldn't read her expression. Couldn't tell if she was going to shoot me or the doc or both. Then she lowered her weapon. "You just signed your own decommission, Razor." "I know." She turned and walked away. I heard her voice on comms reporting my insubordination. I had maybe 5 minutes before a team would arrive to take me in. I looked at the Ripper doc. Finish the surgery, get him stable, then get him out of Night City. You understand? The doc nodded. Didn't ask questions. Just went back to work. I left the clinic and headed for the surface. My mind was racing, calculating options. I couldn't go back to MaxTac. Couldn't stay in the city. I needed to disappear. But before I did, I needed to get my evidence out. Needed to make sure someone saw what I'd found. I knew a fixer in Kabuki, guy named Wakako. She dealt in information, and she had connections to every media outlet in Night City. If I could get her my files, she could spread them, make sure the truth got out. I was halfway to Kabuki when my neural implant screamed a warning. Incoming AV. MaxTac markings. They were tracking me. I ran. Running in a body like mine is different than running used to be. There's no burning in your lungs, no ache in your muscles. Just the smooth, mechanical efficiency of chrome legs eating up distance, gyroscopic stabilizers keeping you balanced even at full sprint, and tactical software calculating the optimal route through the crowded streets of Night City. I should have been faster than any pursuit team. My augments were military grade, top of the line. But MaxTac knew exactly what I was capable of because they'd built me. They knew my specs, my limitations, my programming. They knew I'd head for the underground markets where the crowds would cover me, and they'd already deployed intercept units at every major junction. I was being herded. My HUD lit up with threat markers. 3 AVs circling above, 2 ground units closing from the east and west. I diverted into an alley, using my whip to grapple up to the rooftops. For a few seconds I thought I'd lost them. The city sprawled beneath me, a sea of neon and concrete, and I felt the strange vertigo of being so high up with a body that couldn't feel fear the way it used to. Then something hit me from behind. I went down hard, skidding across the rooftop, my chrome shoulder plating sparking against concrete. I rolled to my feet and found myself facing 3 MaxTac operatives in full combat gear. I recognized one of them, a man named Torres, another Redemption Initiative graduate. We'd trained together in the early days. Stand down, Razor, Torres said. His voice was flat, mechanical, pure conditioning. You're being recalled for behavioral correction. Behavioral correction. That was the euphemism they used before they wiped your mind and started over. If you were lucky. If you weren't, they'd just strip your chrome and let you fall apart. I'm not going back, I said. Torres raised his weapon. Same smart-linked pistol I carried. Not your choice. They rushed me simultaneously. Professional, coordinated, exactly how we'd been trained. I met Torres head-on, deflecting his strike and countering with my whip. The monofilament wire wrapped around his gun arm and sliced through the chrome. He didn't scream. Pain suppressors kept him functional. But he dropped back, his arms sparking and useless. The other 2 came at me from both sides. I took a hit to the ribs that would have shattered bone if I'd still had bone. Instead, my armor plating held and I used the momentum to pivot and catch the second operative with an elbow strike to the temple. Her optics shattered, and she went down. The third operative was faster. She caught me in a joint lock, her chrome fingers finding the pressure points in my shoulder assembly. My left arm locked up, servos straining. She was trying to disable me without killing me. Bring me in intact so they could salvage the chrome, I headbutted her. Her nose broke, one of the few parts of her face that was still flesh. She stumbled back, and I followed up with a kick that sent her over the edge of the roof. I didn't wait to see if she'd survive the fall. I ran again, jumping across gaps between buildings, my tactical software mapping routes through the corporate sprawl. I needed to reach Wakako's place in Kabuki. Needed to upload my evidence before MaxTac shut down my neural implant remotely. But I could feel them in my head now. Diagnostic programs probing my systems. They were trying to find the partition where I'd hidden my files, trying to lock me out of my own body. I had minutes, maybe less. I dropped back to street level in an area I knew. Narrow streets packed with food stalls and vendors, crowds thick enough to cover me. I pulled up my hood and tried to blend in, but my chrome was too obvious. People gave me a wide berth, eyes averted. In Night City, you learned not to look at people like me too closely. I found a netrunner's den 3 blocks from Wakako's office. Paid the kid at the door double to let me use a secure terminal. I jacked in and started uploading my files to a dead drop, encrypting them with every trick I'd learned from MaxTac's own cyber warfare division. The files were huge. Case reports, corporate memos, medical records, audio logs, everything I'd collected over 3 months of hunting. It would take time to upload, time I didn't have. My neural implant screamed another warning. MaxTac was triangulating my position. They'd be here in less than 2 minutes. I glanced at the upload progress. 63%. Behind me, the netrunner kid was staring at his monitor. Shit, man. You got serious heat on you. Like, serious. What did you do? Tried to do the right thing, I said. In Night City? He laughed bitterly. That's a death sentence. 87%. I heard engines outside, boots hitting pavement, shouted orders. They were cordoning off the block. 94%. The door exploded inward. Flash grenades filled the room with white light. Even with my optics automatically filtering the glare, I was momentarily blind. I felt hands grabbing me, dragging me down, the weight of armored bodies pinning me to the floor. 100%. Upload complete. I didn't fight. There was no point. I'd done what I needed to do. They hauled me up and I found myself looking into the cold blue optics of the woman who'd recruited me. The one who'd turned me into this. Kovac, she said. Not Reza. My real name. That was a bad sign. You've disappointed us. I found out what we really are, I said. What you made us. You didn't make soldiers. You made clean-up crews. We're just janitors for corporate messes. And that revelation made you think you could fix the system? She almost sounded amused. You're one man, Kovac. One broken man with delusions of justice. I uploaded everything. All the evidence. Who we kill. Why they broke. The corpse that made them break. It's out there now. People will see. People won't care. She leaned closer. This is Night City. Everyone knows the core are corrupt. Everyone knows the system is broken. They know. And they don't care. Because they're too busy trying to survive to worry about justice. Your evidence will disappear into the noise within 24 hours. No one will remember. No one will act. You threw your life away for nothing. I wanted to argue. Wanted to believe she was wrong. But looking at her dead eyes, I couldn't find the words. They took me back to the facility. Back underground where the neon couldn't reach. Back to the cold table and the bright lights and the smell of antiseptic and burnt metal. But this time, they didn't strap me down. They just led me to a cell. Bare concrete, no windows, a single bunk. The door sealed behind me with a hiss of hydraulics. I sat on the bunk and waited. I didn't know what they'd do to me. Decommission, wipe, disposal. Whatever it was, I'd earned it. I'd broken the conditioning, broken my programming, stopped being the weapon they'd made me to be. And for the first time since they'd installed all this chrome, I felt something like peace. Hours passed, maybe days. There were no clocks, no windows, just the hum of ventilation and the occasional footstep in the corridor outside. Then the door opened. The woman entered, flanked by 2 guards. She was holding a data pad. Interesting development, she said. Your files made it to 3 media outlets before we could suppress them. 2 buried the story, but 1, a small independent journalist in Westbrook, ran with it. I felt something stir in my chest. Hope, maybe, or just the ghost of it. The story got traction, she continued. Public outcry, protests outside Arasaka headquarters, even some city council members calling for investigations into corporate augmentation practices. She paused. You actually did something, Kovac. So let me go. We can't do that. You're still a liability. You know too much about MaxTac operations, about the Redemption Initiative, about how we really work. Then what? She set the datapad down on the bunk beside me. On the screen was a new contract, a new identity, a new life. We're offering you a deal. You disappear. New face, new name, new city. We scrub you from the system, give you enough eddies to start over somewhere far from Night City. In exchange, you never speak about this again. Never come back. Never try to be a hero again. I looked at the contract. At the price of my freedom. And if I refuse, then we wipe you and start over. See if the conditioning takes better the second time. It wasn't really a choice, not in any meaningful sense, but it was more than most people got in Night City. I picked up the datapad, scrolled through the terms. New identity, Marcus Chen. Destination, Beijing. Occupation, corporate security consultant. A lie on top of a lie on top of a lie. But it was a way out. I signed. The surgery took 3 days. They removed most of my combat-grade chrome, replacing it with civilian-grade augments that wouldn't trip security scanners or raise eyebrows. My military-spec arms became standard prosthetics. My reinforced spine became a basic neural support system. My optics were downgraded to commercial models with none of the tactical overlays or threat assessment software. They couldn't remove everything. Some of the chrome was integrated too deeply, woven into my nervous system and bone structure. But they removed enough that when I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The man looking back wasn't Daniel Kovacs, wasn't Razor, was Marcus Chen, a ghost wearing borrowed flesh and chrome. They gave me clothes, credentials, a bank account with enough eddies to survive for a few years if I was careful. They gave me a one-way ticket to Beijing on a corporate shuttle. They gave me a new life. But they couldn't give me back the parts of myself I'd lost. The flight was 12 hours. I spent most of it staring out the window at the clouds, trying to remember what it felt like to be human. To feel fear, joy, anger without it being filtered through layers of conditioning and neural programming. To make choices that were mine alone. I couldn't find those feelings. The conditioning had gone too deep. Even with most of the combat chrome removed, my mind still worked like a weapon. I assessed threats in every passenger who walked past, calculated kill zones in the cabin, planned escape routes through the emergency exits. It was automatic, involuntary. Maybe the woman had been right. Maybe you couldn't come back from becoming a weapon. Maybe once you crossed that line, you stayed crossed. Beijing was different from Night City. Cleaner, more orderly. The corporate control was just as absolute, but it wore a prettier face. The neon was brighter, the crowds more regulated, the violence more subtle. Here, people disappeared into black sites instead of dying in the streets. Here, cyberpsychos were rehabilitated in state-run facilities instead of being put down by MaxTac. Different methods, same results. I got an apartment in a mid-tier residential block. Small, clean, anonymous. I got a job doing corporate security consulting, mostly desk work, reviewing threat assessments and security protocols for minor executives who thought they were important enough to need protection. It was boring work, safe work, exactly what I needed. But at night, I couldn't stop thinking about Night City, about the files I'd uploaded, about whether they'd actually changed anything. I started following the news, searched for updates on the Redemption Initiative, on corporate augmentation practices, on MaxTac accountability. For a few weeks, the story had burned hot. Protests, investigations, public hearings. The journalist who'd broken the story, a woman named Sarah Kimura, had done good work. She'd connected the dots I'd given her, followed the money, interviewed victims' families. Then, suddenly, she stopped reporting. Her byline disappeared from the news feeds. When I searched her name, I found a brief obituary. Died in a tragic traffic accident. I knew what that meant. The investigation stalled. The protests fizzled out. The Corps released carefully worded statements about reviewing augmentation safety protocols and prioritizing worker mental health. Nothing changed. Within 2 months, the story was buried under a dozen new scandals and crises. The woman had been right. Night City didn't care. The system was too big, too entrenched. My evidence had been a ripple in an ocean. Brief, meaningless. I should have felt angry, should have felt betrayed, but all I felt was tired. I tried to move on, tried to be Marcus Chen. I went to work, paid my bills, ate meals in quiet restaurants, walked through clean streets. I even went on a few dates, women I met through work or in neighborhood bars. They were nice, normal. They smiled and laughed and talked about ordinary things like weather and promotions and vacation plans. I couldn't connect with any of them. Every conversation felt like I was running a social simulation, saying the right words without feeling them. Every smile I gave was calculated, optimized for the desired response. Every touch felt like I was manipulating a tool instead of connecting with a person. The conditioning had stolen that from me. The ability to just be human without thinking about it. 6 months into my new life, I got a message. Encrypted. Routed through a dozen proxies. It took me 3 days to decrypt it. Inside was a video file. The video showed a MaxTac facility. Not the one I'd been in. This was different. Bigger. More advanced. The camera panned across rows of surgical tables, each one occupied by someone being augmented, being rebuilt, being conditioned. There had to be 50 tables. 50 people being turned into weapons. The camera zoomed in on one face. A young woman, maybe 20, her eyes wide with fear as they lowered the neural interface crown onto her head. Then the video cut to a message. Text only. Your evidence didn't stop the redemption initiative. It expanded it. Budget doubled. Recruitment tripled. They're building an army, Kovac, and you gave them the perfect PR cover. Now they can claim they're reformed while they scale up. You didn't save anyone. You just made it worse. No signature. No return address. Just that message and the knowledge that everything I'd done, every choice I'd made, had been for nothing. I sat in my apartment and stared at the screen for hours. Watched the video loop. Watched that young woman's face over and over. Saw my own fear reflected in her eyes. I thought about going back to Night City. Thought about finishing what I'd started. Thought about finding whoever was running the redemption initiative and putting a bullet in their head. But I knew how that would end. I'd get maybe 1 or 2 targets before MaxTac put me down. I'd die, and the initiative would continue. The machine was bigger than any one person. Bigger than justice. Bigger than revenge. So I did nothing. I deleted the video. Encrypted my terminal. Went to work the next day like nothing had happened. Because that's what you do in a world run by machines. You survive. You adapt. You become the thing the system needs you to be. Even if it kills everything that made you human in the first place. I still work in Beijing. Still live in my small apartment. Still go through the motions of being Marcus Chen. And at night, when I can't sleep, I stare at my chrome hands and think about all the people I killed. All the glitches I deleted. All the victims who'd been turned into monsters by the same system that turned me into a weapon. I tell myself it wasn't my fault. That I was conditioned. Programmed. That I broke free eventually. But I know the truth. The truth is that I was always free to choose. Even with the conditioning. Even with the chrome. Even with the neural programming. I could have said no at any point. I could have refused to kill. Refused to obey. Refused to be what they made me. But I didn't. Because saying no meant dying. Meant suffering. Meant losing whatever scraps of humanity I still had left. So I said yes. Over and over. Until yes became the only answer I knew how to give. That's what it's like to be turned into a walking weapon. It's not the chrome. It's not the programming. It's the moment you realize that the hardest person to fight is yourself. That the most dangerous enemy is the part of you that wants to survive, even if survival means becoming something monstrous. They didn't just give me weapons and armor. They gave me a choice. Be a tool or be destroyed. And I chose to be a tool. I chose to survive. And I've been dying ever since. Sometimes I wonder if those cyberpsychos I hunted had the right idea. Maybe it's better to break completely. To let the chrome fry your brain and turn you into something that can't think, can't feel, can't carry the weight of all the terrible choices you've made. Maybe that's the real freedom. Not in fighting back, not in exposing the truth, but in finally letting go of the lie that any of this means anything. But I can't even do that, because they took that from me too. The conditioning won't let me self-destruct, won't let me give up. It keeps me functional, keeps me moving forward, keeps me alive even when every fiber of what's left of my humanity is screaming to just stop. So I keep going. Marcus Chen, corporate security consultant, normal life, normal routine, and every night I dream of Night City, of neon and blood and the sound of my own gunfire echoing in dark alleys, of faces I've forgotten but my body remembers killing, of a woman crying over a corpse, of a kid on a surgical table, of 50 more being made into monsters just like me. I dream, and I wake up, and I go to work. That's what it's like to be turned into a walking weapon in a world that makes weapons out of people. You don't die. You just stop living. And somewhere in Night City, right now, someone else is being strapped to a cold table. Someone else is being told they're getting a second chance. Someone else is about to learn that there are worse things than dying. I hope they're stronger than I was. I hope they say no, but I know they won't. Because in the end, we all choose survival over our souls. That's the real cyberpunk dystopia. Not the corporations, not the chrome, not the poverty or the violence or the neon-soaked streets. It's the moment you realize you'd rather be a monster than a corpse. And once you realize that, there's no going back. There's only forward, forever forward, until the chrome fails and your body gives out, and you finally get the death you should have chosen from the beginning. That's my life now, waiting for an ending I'm not allowed to choose. Marcus Chen, former MaxTac operative, former weapon, current ghost. And the saddest part? There are thousands like me. People who chose to survive instead of resist. People carrying the weight of what they've become, pretending to be human, going through the motions while the real person they used to be rots away inside. We're everywhere. In every city, every corporation, every system that demands you sacrifice your humanity for a paycheck and a place to sleep. We're the real cyberpsychos. Not the ones who break and rage against the machine, but the ones who break quietly, who swallow the poison and call it survival, who kill their own souls one compromise at a time. And the worst part is, we'll keep doing it, because that's what the system trains us for. Not to fight, not to resist, but to endure, to adapt, to survive at any cost, even if that cost is everything we are. That's what they don't tell you when they offer you chrome, when they promise you power, strength, a second chance. They don't tell you that every augment takes something you can't get back. Every piece of metal they install is another piece of yourself you lose. Every program they upload rewrites who you are until you can't remember who you were. They turn you into something efficient, something effective, something that doesn't hesitate or question or feel. They turn you into a tool, and tools don't get to have souls. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this is a cautionary tale, a warning. You're thinking you'd do better, that you'd be stronger, that you'd choose differently, but you wouldn't. Because when they strap you to the table and give you the choice between becoming a monster or becoming nothing, you'll choose the monster. Every time. Because that's what humans do. We cling to life even when life stops being worth living. I did it. Kira did it. Torres did it. That young woman in the video is doing it right now, and one day someone will offer you the same choice. Maybe not with Chrome. Maybe not with MaxTac. But the choice will come. The system will demand you trade your humanity for survival. And you'll make the trade. Because in the end, we all do. That's the real story. Not about one man who tried to fight back and failed, but about 1,000 others who never tried at all, who took the chrome and the paycheck and the orders and became exactly what the system needed them to be. We're the true horror of Night City, not the pyrotechnic displays of cyberpsychosis, but the quiet death of resistance, the slow surrender of everyone who decides that surviving is more important than living. I'm done now. Done trying to warn you. Done trying to justify myself. Done pretending there's any redemption for people like me. I'm just Marcus Chen, corporate security consultant, a man with too much chrome and not enough soul. And I'll keep going through the motions until my body finally gives out and someone else takes my place in the machine. That's what it's like to be turned into a walking weapon. You don't die in some blaze of glory. You just fade away, one compromise at a time, until there's nothing left but the weapon itself. And the weapon keeps working long after the person inside is gone.